Nigeria is one of the largest and most exciting markets in Africa, and today I'm joined by Christian Reiter, CEO and co-founder of Split the Pot, and Kaan Bulakeri, former head of gaming at Kingmakers, now founder of WekaMawe Advisory, to discuss building a brand there. So, Christian, you said hyperlocalization isn't just painting up a game to look local. What does genuine adaptation actually involve?
I think, people, when we talk about localization, usually when it comes from our perspective as a game provider, at least, it is just, slapping on some colors and putting an icon that is fairly known to a specific market there. I think if you talk about hyper localization as we've done, you need to delve deeper into the specific market. And I mean, deeper is into the customer segment. Who are they? How are they consuming the content? In what situations, with which devices, and what are the key problems for them. So hyperlocalization means that you need to attack all of those facets to this challenge.
Okay, and Kaan, from the operator side, why does that technical groundwork matter as much as the creative side?
From an operator side, when I used to work at Kingmakers and specifically BetKing in Nigeria, not only the technical distinctions of the games that should be light-sized, fast, and quite market fit. When we talk about hyper-localization, the project that we did, which was the first, I believe, in BetKing and in the Nigerian market at this hyper-localization scope, it was very important, as Christian mentioned, to do it properly instead of just changing the logo or changing the color. The technical side is critical also when you do all these changes, and we can deep dive into this a little later, not to make the games much heavier. And I think Split the Pot was a very keen partner in that time to BetKing that understood this. So we did not only hyper localize the game, but we also tried to keep it within the technical capacity that still works very well in the African technological infrastructure.
Just to add a comment, because I fully concur with Kaan, and I believe that this is also about being, humble to the challenge, right? Because we worked very closely together in identifying the challenges, looking at how we solve them together, and then what is the best fit for the local market, in this case Nigeria. And I know that Kaan and his team worked super close with the Nigerian team in Nigeria, of course, because that is how you do the success.
How much of Split the Pot's approach is built around that constraint from day one?
Everything. I mean, Split the Pot, we pride ourselves to do the lightest games on the market, working on very old phones, very old handsets, less technically capable handsets, devices that use browsers that are less common, but are common on the African market.
Kaan, let's talk Danfo Lagos now. So how did the idea of building a game around Lagos's buses come about, and why did that resonate?
Yeah, so that's the little project that we are most proud of. I think from my point of view, from a game performance, game revenue point of view, commercial point of view, it was a great success, because this game, the original game Taxi Ride from Split the Pot, even though it's successful in many other countries in Africa, it was doing absolutely nothing for BetKing back in the time. And after identifying this almost like a hidden gem, we have now decided to make it very Nigerianized, very localized. So we made it the Danfo buses. So, and we collaborated with an influencer. The local marketing team did a phenomenal job. So it was definitely a great effort from the marketing team. And this game, this hidden gem, very successfully and quickly became our top 5 game. It was a great success story.
From the studio side, Christian, what did building around the local everyday object like that change about the design process?
From a technical perspective, make the game accessible for the target audience. And remember, the target audience might have an older phone, they might sit on slow bandwidth, so the data size, for example, needs to be very small. Not to mention that we don't want the end consumer to download a lot of data because that's costly also, right? Because in most African countries, and especially in Nigeria, cost of data is still an issue for the end user. So it was a technical challenge, which was super positive for us to meet up with. And we did a lot of testing together with Kaan and his team and BetKing.
So Kaan, you were closely involved in the JJ Okocha themed crash game JJ Ball X with SmartSoft. What makes a football legend the right ambassador for a product like that?
JJ Okocha is a legend, obviously, worldwide in Nigeria. We found a game that could resonate with something of a worldwide football icon, who is also the brand ambassador of BetKing. So that was a bit of a challenge to answer your question, because it's a bit of a sensitive topic as well in some countries, especially for the football players to be associated with betting activities, with chance games, let's say. This was another crash game where the original player was bouncing the ball and falling and shooting the ball and things like that. So finally, with all parties involved, I think it was another good collaboration that made that game pretty much a similar story of finding a hidden gem that wasn't doing much of a revenue or much commercially, to collaborate with the local marketing, collaborate with JJ himself. The campaign around it was absolutely insane. What, again, the local marketing team, all credits to them, did in Nigeria, in Lagos. They actually broke the Guinness World Record for bringing the largest number of people together for bouncing the ball as a campaign to launch this game. So that's another success story.
You also brought in Brother Shaggy for Danfo Lagos, right? A comedian rather than a sportsman. How did that collaboration go, and what results did you see from that, Kaan?
That's another important decision. Nigeria's population is coming close to 300, if not exceeding it now. Official, unofficial numbers, right? And almost 70% of it is under 30. The median is around 18. So we are looking at a very, very young, very, very Gen Z, very, very new modern generation. So obviously a very important factor in the social media life, in any commercial or advertisement life, is now influencers, the local influencers. Brother Shaggy is a very, very funny guy, very, very much fun guy. He was also breaking out, and this is probably the first engagement that he had with us at BetKing, and we positioned him as the face of the game, Danfo Lagos, but as the driver as well. So that was the funny part of it. So Christian and his technical team was very seamless to put his face on the bus as a driver. And then obviously from the marketing side, we had a lot of campaigns, social media campaigns, local campaigns, physical campaigns that absolutely smashed it for the success of the game. This is an influencer that people can resonate with, right? This young generation that I mentioned. That's why it was very key to choose this influencer, that the population that we are targeting, or that's the BetKing's customer segment, could resonate and associate with. So I think that was the biggest success factor there.
Christian, Nigeria's audience is obviously huge and varied. How do you think about communicating with customers at that scale without it feeling generic?
I think that's really, really good, and I think one of the keys is to be respectful and mindful of your audience, right? Just I'm echoing Kaan here, what he mentioned about the demographic of Nigeria being very young, and also being young can mean different things, but usually, at least if I look back to when I was young, I didn't have that much money, and to be honest, the young generation right now is the impatient generation, right? Mm-hmm. So things need to work. If I don't understand it, I will just remove it. So it's about recognizability, getting people to feel accustomed and getting people onboarded quite quickly. And I think that is the key for a young and booming market like Nigeria.
And Kaan, you've talked about local operators and locally focused game providers being non-negotiable over global ones. Why is that?
I always preach that there's different categories of partners, and it's very important to talk about long-term partnership in terms of an operator and a game provider. So there are those that are very well globally known and established, that see Africa as the next frontier, but they're not very much focusing. For example, Split the Pot is a very much of still a European founded or European led game provider, but really focusing on Africa, multiple different markets in Africa and different dynamics of Africa. And in the third category, I have identified, let's say, the real African game providers that might not have the technological expertise or experience as the likes of Christian has with his partners, technological maybe access, but they are from the ground up maybe the most capable of understanding the local player. So I think it's important to position these three different categories of gaming providers, and I think at Kingmakers in Nigeria, but also in other markets, we have utilized the potential of each category perfectly, whereby a global partner might not have maybe hyper localized, wouldn't have not the technical capability, but mostly resourcing to focus on, let's say, this project, as we did with Christian and Split the Pot team, whereby, so we worked with a global partner that really understands the local market. And I think it's important I really believe it's important to understand that distinction and diversify your gaming catalog portfolio accordingly.
Okay. Christian, what's next for hyper-localized content in Nigeria?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I would argue that it is diving further and delving further into what the players would like to have. I would say to follow their footsteps, because it's a very booming and a very young generation. So following up on their type of consumption of digital, and it might not only be games, right, but other digital goods or services, etc., and to intertwine those, because I think I mean anyone that wants to come into, and it isn't necessarily only Split the Pot or BetKing in this case, anyone, it needs to rise to the challenge of not being generic, right? I don't think you can come into a booming market such as Nigeria with a very generic mindset, thinking that if this works in Brazil, it will work in Nigeria too. You need to respect the player and you need to understand the player. And again, the demographics, just as Kaan mentioned, of the Nigerian player is very different from many other markets.
If I may just add to that, is actually a good bridge for me from the customer point of view, from player point of view. The leadership team at Kingmakers and in other operators that I know, the successful operators, they always start from thinking customer first, player first, understanding different markets. In a place like Nigeria, where there's 300 million people, it's not even one country anymore. We have to understand different regions within the same country and target those segments of customers separately. So I see, when it comes to the future of custom games, hyper-localization, I see three different things. I always saw it in three different layers. First one being what we call, maybe a technical term, but market exclusivity. So if Split the Pot launches a new game, it can be first at BetKing or it can be first at the next operator, right? And then you can maximize the commercial advertisement on that kind of promotional capability. Then the second layer is what we see as branded games. Simply putting the logo or maybe even putting the colors of the associated brand, right? That's what you see in many different countries, not only in Europe, in Latin America, but also in Africa, which I still find, and I think Christian would agree there, we didn't want to go with that, let's say, BetKing taxi ride, right? So no. The third layer is the hyper-localization, is where you really understand the player, you understand what ticks the market, and you really localize it with a symbol, it's not just to create the next jet game that flies, is the next plane that has my colors on it, right? It's in the shape of the image, the bus in this case, in the background, it's the influencer that you use. So if you can do the full picture, as we have discussed in this session, That's where the future of real hyper localization is. I see a lot of people doing the first two, market exclusivity and branded games. I think the real game changer was in our case, but also is the proper hyper localization.
Okay, great stuff, guys. Thank you very much for joining me.